Hey, WealthLab 8 users, Glitch here. Today I'm going to build an indicator library, class library, a .NET class library that will contain a custom indicator that we can compile and then bring into WealthLab. This is from a request on our forum. A few people have asked about how do we build custom indicator libraries for WealthLab, so buckle up. This is how we do it. So I have my Visual Studio 2022 up here, and I'm going to start right off by creating a new project. And I am going to make it a class library because indicator libraries will be class libraries. I'm going to name it project name. Let's call it WealthLab. And I'm going to implement Camarilla Levels in here. So this was another request on the forum to implement Camarilla Levels. So I decided to create a new project that will implement the Camarilla Levels as a custom indicator. Once everything's said and done, I'll probably pull this out and put the indicator into WealthLab proper. But for now, let's put it into our own new class library just to see how this process works. So let's call it WealthLab.Camarilla. Let's make sure I have that spelled correctly. Yeah, that's right. And we'll click next. Framework is .NET 8. Long-term support. WealthLab is still targeting the .NET 8 framework as of now. So we will create the project. All right, so now we've got, let me resize my Visual Studio here to fit this. So we've got a empty project and we've got one class in here, which I'm going to delete. So let's delete that class. And we're going to add a dependency. So we're going to add a dependency and click Browse. And I'm going to navigate to the WealthLab install folder. Program files, Quantacula LLC, WealthLab 8. And we are going to add a reference to the WealthLab.core library. So there we go. We have our reference added under assemblies here, WealthLab.core. So we now have a reference to WealthLab's core library. So now we can create a class, a C# class that will implement our indicator. So let's call it Camarilla.cs. So now we have a Camarilla.cs. Before we go any further, actually, let me right-click on this and say Edit Project File. I'm going to edit the Visual Studio project file for this, and I'm going to set a few properties here that I like to have by default. So give me one moment. So what I've done here is the target framework is set to .NET 8, which, as it was before, we have I added the x64 platform here since WealthLab 8 is a 64-bit build. Adding this will allow us to build our library in 64-bit as well. We're going to give it a version number. By convention. All WealthLab libraries are at version 8.0 and the build number will be 1 since this is the first build of this. I gave it the package ID is the same as the project name. I put in the author and the company. I set copy local file assemblies to true because I like that. I like having all of the referenced assemblies copied to the bin folder. I gave it a product name of Camarilla. This technically isn't required, but WealthLab extensions do use this product kind of flag. So if you're building a extension that you want us to offer in our extensions page, you should coordinate with us and give it a appropriate product here. Then I have a couple of configurations, debug and release. So now that that's done, I can go into our configuration manager and I can create a new configuration, and the new configuration will be x64. So we are going to, whenever x64 is selected in debug or release, we are going to build on the x64 platform. So if any CPU is selected, we will be building on the any CPU platform. If x64 is selected, we'll be building on the x64 platform. So now that that's set, we can select that build configuration. When we're ready to go to build the production version of this, we can select x64 to make sure it's built as a 64-bit binary. So I'm now going to save that, going to back to my class, and we're going to make it a public class. And this class will inherit from the indicator base class, which is defined in WealthLab.core. So after I made that inheritance, notice this turned red, which means I have to now implement these abstract properties and methods. So I click there, and now we have some starter code for what we want to do. So the name of the indicator will be, this is the full name that will appear when you select the indicator in the indicators list. We'll call it Camarilla Levels. The abbreviation is what WealthLab will use to define the indicator. Typically, it's the same as the class name, although in a few cases it's different, like DI plus uses the actual DI plus, whereas the class name is DIPLUS. But usually this abbreviation will be the same as the class name. We have a description, and we will make sure to give us a little reminder to provide a good description of Camarilla Levels. What pane tag should these Camarilla Levels be plotted on? So if an indicator should be plotted in its own pane, we might give it a named tag like this. However, for things like Camarilla Levels, these should be plotted in the price pane or whatever pane, and in this case it's going to be the price pane, because these indicators will use all of the open, high, low, close values. So we are going to plot them in the price pane. We say price here. That tells WealthLab to plot the indicator in the price pane. Or if it's something like a moving average, it will plot that indicator in the same pane as whatever the source series is. We now have a populate method, but before we get into populate, we need to define the parameters of the indicator, generate parameters. So we will overwrite generate parameters, and we are going to add some parameters. So we're first going to add, of course, the source. So the source of the indicator can be either a time series or it can be a bar history. So we are going to make this type a bar history. And because I don't have WealthLab.core in the using clause, it prepended that with core dot. I'm going to remove that, and I will then say select using WealthLab.core, which added that to the using clause. I'm going to delete these other usings that currently aren't being used. So we've got a parameter type of bar history, and whenever you use a bar history as the source, you can specify null for the third parameter here, which is the default value of that parameter. So next, we are going to allow you to specify which of the 8 Camarilla levels this particular indicator is going to pull up. So we're going to expose that as a parameter. And this time I'm going to create a variable for it. And we're going to make it a name of type. And we're going to give it a parameter type of string choice. So string choice will let the user select from a number of different options in the list. And the default value is going to be, let's say, S3, because I believe that the Camarilla levels are basically 8 levels. Yeah, starting with S3 and going to S6 and then R3 to R6. So we are now going to populate those choices that the user will be able to select from when defining that parameter. So we're going to say p.choices.add, and we're going to add S3 as the first choice. And then we are going to copy that and add S4, 5, and 6. And then we'll just copy those 4, and we'll change those to R4, 5, and 6. So now that the parameters are defined, we're going to go back up here and implement some constructors for this class. So we typically implement 2 constructors for indicators in WealthLab. The first is a empty constructor. So that's all that's going to do. The second is a constructor that will take some incoming parameters, which will correspond to the parameters we defined below. So we're going to give it a bars history parameter and a pivot type string parameter. And we'll call the base constructor. And in this constructor is where we're going to assign the values that came in the constructor in these parameters here to the parameter instances that we have in the indicator, which is exposed via this parameters property. So the parameters property is a parameter list which contains instances of the parameters that we defined down here in generate parameters. So parameters 0 value is going to be assigned the bar history. Parameters 1 is going to be assigned the pivot type. After the values are assigned, we can call populate, which will calculate the values of the indicator. All right, so let's now implement the populate method. So the first thing we do in populate is we pull out the values of the parameters. So the first one is a bar history, and the value will come from parameters 0 as bar history, helper method, and the pivot type will come from parameters 1 as string. So we now have the bar history and the pivot type. The next thing we do when creating custom indicators is we typically assign a value to the date times property, and we'll just make it the same as the bar history date times. So assigning this list of date times to this date times property causes the values of this indicator, since this class is derived from indicator base, it has a set of values in a values property. Assigning a value to these date times causes that values series to be expanded and fully populated with empty values, or NaN, not a number, values right now. So what we now need to do is actually populate the values. So Camarilla levels are based on the closing prices of the previous bar. So let's see here. I think we need to calculate all of this on a daily scale, and then we'll need to expand those out so they fit into the intraday scale if these things are being used on an intraday basis. So I think what I'll do is, let's see. So we need to get at the daily scale of this. So first of all, I'm going to say if the scale of the bar history is greater than or equal to daily, we're going to just be able to do it on the history itself instead of trying to compress the intraday data to the daily. So that's what we'll handle there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another variable here, bar history daily, and I'll assign it initially to the same bar history. But here's how we'll do it. We'll say if the bar history is intraday, then we're going to say the daily history, and I'm going to use a class called bar history compressor, which will compress the bar history to a daily bar history. So we now have the daily bar history here in this BH daily. And if it's not intraday data anyway, it's going to have the same as the incoming source bar history. So now that that's done, we can actually do the calculation. So what we'll do is use a switch statement. So depending on the pivot type, we're going to do different things here. And the default will be, say, S3. So the default will be, and I think we actually, let's see. Let's declare a time series up here to store like the result. We'll call it TS. So here, if the default, and that will be the S3 value, all the other ones I'll define like above, but if it's S3, actually R6, let's make R6 the default value. So since that one is pretty straightforward. So that is high divided by low times close. So TS is equal to BH daily dot high divided by BH daily dot low times BH daily dot close. And after that we can break. So there we have our default value, and we can now calculate the other values. It looks like some of the values actually refer to other ones. So I think what I'll do is anyone that references other values, like this R6 here, I'm actually going to declare it up top. I'm going to calculate it like right here. All right, so there we've got R6. So we need also like R3 and R4. So let's declare R3. So R3 is equal to 1.1 times high minus low. So I see high minus low is used a number of times. So I'm going to declare that up front. So there's high minus low. So now we've got that. So we could say HL R3 is equal to times HL divided by 4. All right, 1.1 times HL divided by 4 plus close. So we've got R3. R4 is equal to 1.1 times HL divided by 2 plus bhdaily.close. So there's that. So we've got R4, R3. So let's start go ahead and implementing some of these. So if the token is R3, we're going to say, and this will be our result here. We're going to say the result is equal to R3. We can plug in R6 there. So we've got R3, we've got R6. Let's do R4 next. TS is equal to R4. So R5, let's calculate and return R5 here. Since we don't need to use R5 anywhere else, we will just calculate it like right here. So TS is equal to R4 plus 1.168 times R4 minus R3. R4 minus R3. Okay, so there we have R5. So we've got R3, 4, 5, and the default is R6. So there's our R's. Let's do our S's. So we'll kind of do the same thing here. So we need S3 and S4. S3 is equal to close minus 1.1 times HL divided by 4. And S4 is equal to close minus 1.1 times HL divided by 2. And we need, do we need S6? Doesn't look like it. All right, so let's start implementing the S's here. S3, we'll just simply assign that to S3 that we already generated. Same for S4. All right, so now S5. So S5 is equal to S4 minus 1.168 times S3 minus S4. S3 minus S4. Break. S6. Close minus R6 minus close. R6 minus close. Break. Okay, so we now have a time series TS for all of the different cases of the Camarilla level pivots here. So now that we have that, it's possible that this is in daily scale. So we need to expand that back into the intraday scale. So here's how we'll do it. We will say if we're intraday, we're going to say TS is equal to time series synchronizer.synchronize. So we're going to synchronize our time series with our source bar history. So what this is going to do is it will align it such that the daily value of each indicator is available on the very last intraday bar. And since we actually don't want that, we want it so that the daily value is always from the previous day. We're going to shift this over again 1 bar to the right to compensate for that, because we actually want it completely shifted over. So I'm going to say TS is equal to TS shift right 1 bar. So that should synchronize it properly so that the Camarilla levels are always showing the daily value of the previous day, even on the last bar of the day, which normally those values would be available. But for Camarilla levels, we don't want to do that. So we've now shifted that. And now that we have the values here in this TS, we can tell the indicator to use those values by using this helper method. Say assume values of, and we're going to assume the values of this time series TS. All right, so let's see. Can we build this? Build solution. Let's go to our output. We've compiled it. Everything looks okay so far. And how do we run this in WealthLab now? Let's go to our output folder. So I'm going to open up my Windows Explorer and go to my repos, the debug folder, and here it is. So we've got WealthLab.Camarilla.dll. This is what we're looking for. So I'm going to copy that. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to go back to my desktop, and I'm going to right-click on my WealthLab icon on my desktop. And you can't really see it, it's off screen, but I'm going to, in the pop-up menu, I'm going to say Open File Location. So this is my program files, Quantacula LLC, WealthLab 8 folder. I'm going to right-click in there and say Paste. And since it's an administrator location, I'll just say Continue. That will copy the DLL into there. And now when I run WealthLab, so let's run the production version of WealthLab right from that directory. So here we are, and let's open up a empty chart. Let's click on our indicators list, and I see a Camarilla folder and a Camarilla indicator with a little reminder here to provide a good description, but let's drag it over, and we've got our types here, S3 through R6. So let's put S3 out. So there's S3. I think we have to switch to intraday. Let's switch to a 15-minute scale. So here we go. Here's our S3 on a 15-minute. So let's see, what's the first bar of the day? So this is the first bar of the day, 9:45, and this is the last bar of the day. So it's correctly aligning. It's showing us the Camarilla level of the previous trading day. Let's drag over. Maybe we change this one to green. And let's drag over the other levels. Let's say S4. We'll make that a green as well. S5. Make that even a little bit lighter green. And S6. We'll make that the lightest green of all so far. So there's our Camarilla support. What about resistance? Let's see. Let's put R3. There's a resistance. Let's put R4. Let's bump that up a little bit brighter. And let's put R5. Make that like an orangey. And finally R6. Make that one yellow. So here we go. Here are our Camarilla levels plotted on an intraday chart from our own indicator library that we compiled in Visual Studio. So that's how it's done. I will kind of wrap up this indicator into WealthLab base, and I'll add a few other tweaks, like I'll give it a static series method, and I'll try to do some dynamic coloring based on which one you select, and I'll see if I can get it so it can have an option to plot all of the companion indicators. But what I'll do is when that's done, I can provide the updated source code for this on the Discord. But that's it for now. This is how you create a custom indicator library for WealthLab. Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you all in the forums.